moving on, I think we can talk about the only faction that has got all of this card, most of this card, which is Nilfgaard. They're finally getting their spy identity back, which I think a lot of people have been asking for ever since the start of Homecoming. So do you guys think like this expansion will help to bring the old spy archetype back into the meta? Like, how do you predict the power level depending on the cards we have seen so far? Do you think they are a good design or mediocre?
Well, I don't really know that this god will be the strongest or not, but compared with the new card of Syndicate, the Nilfgaard card is much better than Syndicate. And well, here's one weird thing that it seems like a lot of Gwent players are big fans of Nilfgaard, because when the Nilfgaard get nerfed, new card get nerfed, a lot of people say, Sleepshare, you're doing wrong. But when it gets when they just go back to the nerf, or they just make it stronger, they say, wow, Sleepshare, you're doing good. I don't know if it is good, or because I am not a big fan of Nilfgaard though. I'm a fan of Monster. And by the way, Nilfgaard is, by now the card is much stronger than Syndicate. I don't know if there's like Skellige or another faction's card can reach the same level of the Nilfgaard.
Yeah, there seems to be like it seems to that Nilfgaard cards so far are just the best in terms of power levels and versatility, I think, which is kind of concerning. And Redrame, what do you think about Nilfgaard's expansion?
I'm actually not as sure. I think right now, if they just put Nilfgaard into the game, it would be really crazy.
Yeah.
But it seemed like with how they were balancing this expansion, they were trying to make this expansion very strong and have all of the decks coming out of the expansion look very different from how they currently look. Just because Scoia'tael has been dominant for so long, and a lot of other decks have looked very similar for a good amount of time. Who knows if that will actually be true? I hope if they give other factions some of the support that Nilfgaard is getting. I actually kind of like the new Nilfgaard cards. I think some of them, like Coup de Grace, are really cool. It's kind of an interesting card to try to use. I like how you can give cards spying, but it's pretty clunky to do, and it's you can play around it sort of in the way that you can play around Invo by just saving your good cards. It feels like a more fair way to give that sort of deck a payoff than just like really good point card or really good engine. Just because it's flexible and it can reward good matchup knowledge. I'm pretty disappointed, honestly, that they made nerfs before the expansion even dropped. It feels kind of unprofessional for them to be nerfing cards like in the middle of a release. It's like, even if the cards ended up being broken, they could just nerf them very soon after. And so it feels like, what's the point of getting excited for a new release if who knows whether this card is even going to go into the game? For Amnesty in particular, I sort of understood it, just because a lot of people really dislike the idea of Seas, and the idea of potentially a bronze card fully answering another bronze card, even though the effect I think was a little bit niche and not actually... I don't think that card was as crazy as people made it out to be at 5 provisions, just because it required devotion and was still sort of a side grade from Swears. It definitely had a lot of advantages in that deck, but we can't tell yet how easy it is to build Nilfgaard Devotion. Right now, a lot of the Nilfgaard decks use neutrals.
Yeah, I think it's just like really unprofessional and a bad look on CDPR when they're changing cards during the release. It makes the fan more confused about how the cards actually are, and yeah, it's just a very weird stuff to do, I think. And about like some specific Nilfgaard cards, I think one of the cooler cards they got during the expansion is Coup de Grace, which is a 10p tactic that can basically get you any card that has spying on it. Like me personally, I'm kind of I think it's a really strong card. If you have like things like Devotion Fergus and the other cards that give spying to use with the card. So like, what do you guys think about the card? Like Redrame, you just said you think it's pretty good and not a broken one just yet. And Ari, like, what's your take on like some of the new cards that you got from the expansion?
The card you have said is more like the stronger version of the
sword.
Hangate sword, yes. And I would say that it's much stronger than the sword. Well, we don't know if it is really good in the future meta, but I don't think the card should be made like this way, because you just add one provision and you add like easier way to get the death blow. So like Redrame has said, the CDPR is gonna make the card stronger, like next version or next version, but I would prefer another way. I would prefer the more balanced way.
Yeah.
If you're keeping on the current meta, and you have to focus on the current meta's points, like the 4 points, the full provision will be like 6 points, and the third provision will be like 10 points. You have to keep your rule, because you made that rule and you have to keep it. If you changing the rule, you have to change all the past cards. That's what I want to say.
Yeah. The power creeping in this expansion, it's pretty significant, I think, compared to the last ones. And like Coup de Grace is basically a straight upgrade from Hangate Sword. And yeah, like a lot of the new cards that Nilfgaard get is like, for example, Fergus and the Brassens are just significantly better than some of the cards we have right now, which could be a problem since we might just see the new cards after the expansion comes out and nobody is playing the old cards from the past expansions. That's a possibility, but yeah, interesting to see how CDPR will try to balance things out as the meta continues to evolve. And moving on to the next faction that we can discuss, which is Syndicate. They are getting some more support for the Fire Swarm archetype. Like, I don't think it has seen much play ever since its release on like in competitive decks. I mean, the only decks that utilize Congregate as a leader are just crime decks rather than actual swarm decks. So do you think like the new addition, like based on what we have seen so far, do you think the new cards will try to push like the Firestorm archetype a little bit more? Or do you think it will still suck after the expansion comes out? Redrame, like I saw you playing on stream some of the Storm decks, so like do you have an opinion on that?
I think the deck actually doesn't suck that much. The good cards in that deck are already good. It's just kind of an issue of the deck not having very many cards and having to either run cards that suck or more commonly just sort of like smush together two game plans to a point where it can be sort of clunky to coordinate all of the Firesworn cards in the same round and sort of like still like make your way around having to win 2 out of 3 of the rounds. I think that some of the new Firesworn cards, like the Fallen Knight, which you get 2 of, could potentially be a pretty big payoff. And I think Eternal Fire Priest is a very underrated card, just because it's an engine that you can protect with your leader very easily. And having a card that could potentially have more of a payoff than Eternal Fire Priest, I think might actually help push that deck. I wouldn't expect that card on its own to make the deck like crazy good or anything like that, but I think it'll make it a more viable option.
Yeah, definitely. And Ari, have you been trying out like the Syndicate, those more swarm-oriented card archetypes?
Well, I've played a lot of Firestorm deck before. The problem, because I think that the deck itself is strong enough to reach like tier 1 or tier 2 top. The problem is not about the deck itself, it's more about the anti-Fireswarm card like Igni, Lambert, or the Scaligay card Wild Boar, right? Those cards are so... they can deal so many damage to Fireswarm deck. And even the next expansion, the current new expansion, they made a lot of strong, good Firestorm card, but it have we still have the wild boar, right? And we cannot against the wild boar or Lambert or Igni. So I don't think the fire it will make Fireswarm stack stronger. I believe that, but I don't think it will push the Fireswarm stack to tier 1 top, because just those anti cards there.
Yeah, it's really easy to counter, like not like the other Syndicate decks. Like if you're playing Classic Flora, even if your scenario gets bombed, you sometimes can still win, but for Firestorms it's just really bad when you're playing against like things like Greatsword. And yeah, their Welver is just way too much points to handle most of the times. So yeah, like I guess it's hard to say like whether Firestorm will actually be good without seeing the rest of the cards, and I guess more importantly whether there'll be people running the tech cards against Storm decks. So yeah, I guess we have to see how the meta turns out. And as for like the rest of the factions or the rest of the cards, do you guys have any speculations or hopes for all of the rest of the cards? What would you like to see being added with the expansion?
I'm hoping the monster cards are good. Ethereal is really good for some decks. Almost kind of that's another card that's kind of scary. Just because it is so sticky. And it's kind of just impossible for your opponent to do much of anything against it besides like Igni, which is not a card that I want to see being encouraged even more. So good monster cards would be good. I'm hoping that there's not just more Harmony support. I'm hoping that Oak Critters is not indicative of what Scoia'tael is getting. I'd also like to see Weather make a return to monsters as a whole. I think that was one mechanic that they kind of just axed from monsters entirely when they decided that they didn't want Weather to be as important to new Gwent as old Gwent. But it felt like the Weather that came from cards like Wild Hunt Hound and Old Gwent were perfectly fine. And I think it would be cool to see that sort of make a return. The Wild Hunt archetype as well.
Yeah, Wild Hunt is also one of the stuff that the fans have been asking for a long time, and I think we are going to see a lot of Wild Hunts for the expansion. And Ari, what's your speculations?
Well, first, I don't want more elf card. have more strong card move. I don't want the card will be elf. And the second, the Skellige evolve card, I would like it will be, well, can be. I hope it can be, and I hope it can be evolved into Hamza. It's interesting, like the old Gwent. Everybody, we know the old Gwent, right? And the candy count down 3 times, and boom, board explode, and Hamdars came out. That's what I want for the evolve card. Like you hold the candy on your hand, and after 3 turns, after 2 rounds, and it became like a Hamdar. That will be so interesting for me.
Yeah, that would be really, really cool. Yeah, and yeah, for me personally, like I would just like to see more balanced and interesting cards. Like, that's basically it. Because like so far, I think the cards have been pretty interesting. Although the power level of new card is a bit concerning, but yeah, we have to see like what the rest of the set of cards will turn out. And
I could see no card being balanced. It's just hard. It's just hard. A lot of the cards are so good in the deck that they want to go into, but I don't think they can all go in the same deck.
And another thing about spies is that since there are only 2 rows right now, it is much easier to fill up your opponent's board, especially against decks that play a lot of units, which I guess could be a problem. So yeah, that's kind of concerning. Anyways, Ari, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Because I played a lot of monster funny deck before, like the moon rat deck. Well, I guess it will be the problem, especially we saw the Nilfgaard evolve card. If you use the Nilfgaard evolve card with the in here, and you will fill the like 4 units on the opponent's deck, opponent's board. That will be so damageful, I think, for some decks gameplay, like Elf maybe example, or maybe the deck we talked before, the Syndicate 5 Swarm deck. We all know that they need the board. They need the board. So I really don't like those cards like fill the opponent's deck, opponent's board. This will ruin the player's gameplay.
Spice just feels, yeah, I don't know. I just hope that CDPR will find a good way to balance out these problems as the expansion comes out. So, lastly, since both of you are really good players, like, do you have any advice for the new players that are getting to Gwent, like, regarding how they can try to improve their understanding of the games? Like, do you have any advice for them?
I think the big thing I would say, focusing on good fundamentals first is important. I think a lot of people sort of just want to skip right away to, can I build and play the best deck? And I think that trying a lot of different decks is really useful for understanding sort of what makes certain strategies work, what makes them fail, how do I try to like counter them whenever I see that my opponent's playing something sort of like this. As far as crafting goes, definitely like feel free to talk to players that are more familiar with the game. Just try to get resources that, like, cards that are strong are very good to craft, that you can put in a lot of different decks. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds good. And Ari, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, first, don't want to play, like the Redrame said, don't want to play the full deck for tier 1 deck. at the beginning of the game. You either spending money or spending your time to get those cards. It's the first thing. And the second one is that if you want to win the game, you have to lose first. You lose and you find out how opponents play, how opponents win, and you learn from your opponents. That's the way I get to the win.
That's really important stuff. Just learn from your mistakes and try to improve gradually. And yeah, I think that will be it for the third episode of Voice of Ofir. Thank you to everyone that is watching this video. Thanks to Redrame for accepting the invite and showing up today. And also thanks to Ahri for joining us for this chat about Gwent. It was a blast just chatting with both of you guys. And hope you guys have a wonderful rest of the week. Stay safe and we'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.
See you.
Thank you.